Hello, this is Crispin Flintoff from Not the Andrew Marr Show. Before this video starts, I'd just like to ask if you'd subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because we will be covering the general election from a totally different perspective from what you get from the mainstream media. We'll be talking about the candidates who are taking on Labour and the Tories and pushing them all the way. So please subscribe and get updates. Really pleased on Not the Andrew Marr Show to be joined again by John McEvoy, investigative journalist at Declassified UK. How are you doing, John?
Yeah, very well. Cheers, Crispin.
Busy, I guess.
Yeah, as always, as always.
Well, the reason I wanted you to come on the show is to talk about this story that you published this week about Keir Starmer. It's censored Keir Starmer's emails about Israeli war crimes case. The Crown Prosecution Service is refusing to release files on how Starmer blocked the arrest of former Israeli Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni over alleged war crimes during the brutal bombing of Gaza in 2008. I'll just go through a bit of what you've written here. In October 2011, Keir Starmer was asked by a human rights group and law firm to issue an arrest warrant for former Israeli Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni, who was visiting London over alleged war crimes. Starmer was then Director of Public Prosecutions at the Crown Prosecution Service, but 2 days later he blocked the application for Livni's arrest, citing a Foreign Office decision to grant her visit special mission status. Now, this is Tzipi Livni, and this is what her war crimes were, as you mentioned in the article. She was the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs between 2006 and 2009 and a member of Israel's war cabinet during the brutal bombing of Gaza between December 2008 and January 2009, known as Operation Cast Lead. According to a UN report, numerous serious violations of international law were committed by Israel during the military operations in Gaza, which killed around 1,400 Palestinians, 333 of whom were children. Those crimes including the direct targeting and arbitrary killing of Palestinian civilians, as well as a deliberate and systematic policy to target industrial sites and water installations. The UN report specifically cited Livni as saying Israel is not a country upon which you fire missiles and it does not respond. It's a country that when you fire on its citizens, it responds by going wild, and that is a good thing. So as you can see, I mean, that's sort of similar to what we're seeing. I mean, obviously now it's a bigger scale, but we're seeing war crimes now, and we saw war crimes then. And Keir Starmer was blocking the attempt to stop her coming into the country. Can you tell us how he did that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, as you mentioned, just to begin with, I think this is an important case, an important story, because the kind of impunity that was granted to officials, Israeli officials like Tzipi Livni, over their role in war crimes in 2008, 2009, that has obviously emboldened Israeli officials to commit further war crimes today. And what we're seeing, as you mentioned today, is similar attacks in terms of indiscriminate bombing, ground invasion, wiping out civilian infrastructure, water supplies, hospitals, roads, and so on and so forth. But of course, it's it's on a much greater scale today. So, I mean, what actually happened in this case? It's kind of important to offer some context before I describe precisely what Starmer did and what his role in this case was. Because there was an original arrest warrant issued for Tzipi Livni in 2009 when she was planning to visit Britain shortly after the culmination of Operation Cast Lead. She didn't visit in the end. However, a Westminster Magistrates Court did actually issue an arrest warrant for her for alleged war crimes. And the way that this happens is under something called universal jurisdiction. And universal jurisdiction basically means that officials from foreign countries can be placed under arrest and prosecuted for the most grave of crimes. So we're talking about war crimes, torture, and so on. So there was an initial arrest warrant issued for Livni back in 2009. She didn't visit. The Labour government at the time promised to kind of change the proceedings of universal jurisdiction cases. And this was basically to facilitate Israeli officials to visit Britain without fear of prosecution. So if we fast forward to September 2011, the coalition government, so when Cameron was in charge, they instituted changes to universal jurisdiction legislation. And what that basically meant was that if a private, application was issued for an arrest warrant under universal jurisdiction legislation, they could no longer go privately through the courts, through Westminster Magistrate Court, for example. It had to get approval from the Director of Public Prosecutions at the Crown Prosecution Service. So in October 2011, just 1 month after this new legislation is put into place, of course, Keir Starmer is the then DPP at the CPS. And so he's issued, once again, with an arrest application for Tzipi Livni. And this was basically, Tzipi Livni was visiting the UK in an effort to kind of test the new legislation, but also celebrate the new legislation. Basically a show of power. Look, I can go visit Britain now without fear of prosecution. And 2 days before she arrived, a human rights organisation, the Palestine Centre for Human Rights, alongside a law firm, issued a private arrest application for Livni on behalf of Palestinian civilian victims of the Israeli bombardment in 2008-2009. And so Starmer then basically has to decide, right, whether to issue the arrest warrant or not. And the basis upon which Starmer is obliged to decide is whether there is a credible case that they will eventually be prosecuted. And so Starmer basically waits a day and a half, 2 days. The CPS claims that they haven't reached a concluded view on whether there's sufficient evidence, even though the Westminster Magistrates Court has already issued an arrest warrant for Livni. And on the second day, this is now October the 6th, 2011, the Foreign Office retroactively attributes special mission status to Livni. And that basically means that she's protected through diplomatic immunity from prosecution. So that basically kind of puts a cover of prosecution over Livni. Now, the important question is, if there was not sufficient evidence to prosecute Livni for war crimes, the Foreign Office would not have needed to issue this special mission status whatsoever. And the other question is, why did Starmer wait? Why did it take him, 2 days and the CPS 2 days to make a concluded view on this, given the weight of evidence of Livni's complicity in war crimes? The UN report that you quoted earlier, it was a vast report by a UN fact-finding mission led by Richard Goldstone, which found that Israel, within which Livni was the war minister and the foreign minister, was guilty of major international war crimes. And so these are the two clear questions, really. Was the collaboration between Starmer's office and the Foreign Office, as well as the Attorney General's office, on the implications of arresting Livni for Britain's kind of national interest? Would this basically cause a sting? Would this cause an embarrassment to the British government? And did that influence Starmer's decision-making? Now, it's difficult to know precisely what went on behind the scenes. Because as you mentioned, I issued a Freedom of Information request to the CPS to receive all of the communications between Starmer's office with regards to this case to and from Starmer's office. And what they came back with was a number of heavily redacted emails. Basically all of the emails that they got back to me with were mostly redacted or entirely redacted. And I found that closer to the time, somebody else issued a Freedom of Information request about this, and they rejected it outright. So they've been basically, blocking information and censoring information on precisely what Starmer's role in this process was for a very long time.
With the redacted emails, do you often get that kind of blank response? Where you can't see a thing apart from it says to Starmer. That's and the date. It's ridiculous. What's your experience of that?
Yeah, well, I've got a lot. I work a lot in the National Archives. I've just come back from there yesterday, And you even get documents going back to the 1940s, 1950s that are redacted in very much the same way. I mean, there's a problem of institutional secrecy within the British state, and that extends to, foreign policy, it extends to things like what Starmer was doing as DPP. But I mean, I was nonetheless surprised at the extent of the redactions. I mean, that there was only, I think, one email that was actually from Starmer himself, even though he was presiding over this entire decision-making process. And I mean, basically all of the other emails, it's very difficult to see what was even being discussed. And on top of that, I mean, these are just the emails that are received. There are a number of additional emails, an unquantifiable amount of emails that they have refused to release altogether. So there's basically it's impossible to quantify how much information that they're censoring, but you can be sure to say that it's the vast majority of it.
There's another story that Declassified have been running with, which is the Labour Friends of Israel. We've seen on a tweet, we've seen today that Alan Duncan, the former Tory foreign minister, has denounced members of Conservative Friends of Israel for their silence on this and how they are corrupted by their membership of that group. Nobody seems to have left Labour Friends of Israel since the genocide has been going on, or the war crimes that have been kind of spelled out this week on the aid workers. How bad is Labour Friends of Israel in terms of corrupting the party?
Yeah, I think Labour Friends of Israel has quite a significant degree of influence over British politics. I mean, you can just crunch the numbers. As we did at Declassified, 2/5 of Starmer's cabinet have received funding from either Labour Friends of Israel or a pro-Israel lobby individual, Trevor Chin. A significant proportion of Labour MPs are parliamentary supporters or officers of Labour Friends of Israel. I think it's about 37%. And 32 sitting Labour MPs have accepted money from Labour Friends of Israel. So, I mean, there's very few lobbying organisations in British politics that can brag about having such an influence over the Labour Party. Now, the extent to which the amount of influence that actually buys, of course, is up for question. I don't think there's obviously a structural analysis that we need to put first and foremost, right? That Israel is a strategic partner of the British state in an incredibly important region of the world. So it's not simply lobbying that makes Israel important. Israel is already important, but these lobbying organizations work very hard to curtail criticism of Israel that would actually, that could actually change British policy. So I think these organizations kind of work on the fringes, and they maintain basically an important degree of discipline when it comes to criticizing Israel or shifting British foreign policy away from supporting Israel.
Right. I mean, did you see the tweet, by the way, that Angela Eagle put out saying that she's not a member of Labour Friends of Israel? However, she's listed on the website. Do you think that this will be an embarrassment? Do you think some of the Labour MPs might try and come off that list?
Well, I mean, first of all, I did see that tweet from Angela Eagle. I mean, she's just playing semantic games by the looks of it. I mean, maybe she's not, effectively a member, but she's listed as a parliamentary supporter of the organisation. So, personally, I don't see any difference between those two concepts. When it comes to, whether Labour Friends of Israel is going to lose any of its parliamentary supporters over the genocide, I mean, this is something that happened before. I think it was during Operation Cast Lead, where just 2 Labour MPs asked for their names to be struck off the list. Now, I checked the list of names shortly before the 7th of October. They're kind of the website is kind of retained in the Internet Archive. And I found that actually the number of Labour MPs that are associated with Labour Friends of Israel amid the genocide has increased by, I think, 3. So as it stands, Labour Friends of Israel's list of parliamentary supporters has not been declining; it's actually been growing, which is quite incredible. Whether, you know, in the coming days and weeks there'll be sufficient pressure from the public to get people to de-link from this organisation remains to be seen, but I certainly hope so.